Um, so let me start sharing right away because, as I said, we have a lot to cover today. Remember, this is our adaptation. Oh, you see, this is not even the one. I was using the same slide deck, uh, one for 1 week and the other one for the second week. I just thought it would be easier in case I needed to go back to this sometime in the future, as it is the case. I'm basing most of this, well, most the adaptation, because this program is already an adaptation of something we did with the EFL teachers from Monsignor Bosset. They had a longer course. Their course lasted, I think it was around mm, like 7 or 8 months. We started last July, and we finished just before I traveled a couple of months ago. So that was an adaptation of the original program, and this is the adaptation of the adaptation, basically the adaptation to the adaptation, because of course this is a different format, a different audience, a different everything except for the content. And this is, I think, in itself, this is a sample of how a material adaptation should work without losing the essence of whatever you're trying to teach. So enough of me talking nice things about myself. Let's start the conversation because, as I said, we had a lot to cover. We have a lot to cover. You see, this is the first time we don't have any strike throughs because we're going to cover all of this. And also, by the end, I won't give you instructions for the final project, but I'll do it later today. So you have time to breathe. So Miguel has time to breathe as well now. Um, but that's not why that's it. That's here because this is already loaded. And remember, the idea is to have, yes, cognitive demand, but without being overwhelming. So as you can see here, we will finish the section, say part four. We will talk about the last one, the last skill, the one we mentioned yesterday before leaving, which is writing. And we will see how to approach writing as a process, which is probably something we have already, something we already know, but we will check the basis of this. We will discuss how to give effective feedback for writing tasks. And as I said, developing classroom activities is something permanent because this is something like ubiquitous, right? This is supposed to cover or to influence everything where we have discussed in these 2 weeks. Then we will move on to part five, which includes assessment. I remember I told you last week that we would have some time at the end to talk about assessment. We will talk about critical thinking, language learning, and we will close with reflective teaching and professional development in general, and particularly as a TESOL professional, which is our case here. Very quickly, ladies, I want you to take a look at these beautiful cats here. They all have different moods, and considering today is the final day, this is something I like doing in general, but I haven't been able to do so here because of time issues. But I said, okay, today we can go ahead and hear the guys here. So on the cat scale, we have here from 1 to 9. You can choose one or two that reflect how you're arriving here today talking about our final session. You can type it in the chat if you want. I think if you look at my eyes, I'm kind of tired, um, and also because of weather conditions. It's getting colder here. You know how when you're in the transition. So yesterday was like very hot, and last night was like cold, and so I had like a very uncomfortable night. So I think I would be maybe number three or number four now, maybe eight. We have already answers in the chat. Pierina is one, good. Uh, that's very positive. Alba
Yeah,
is
man, come on, come on.
yes. I
Cheer
never
up.
have this, and I'm doing it today.
It's
But
8 a.m. I am active. I am very active. I am choosing an outfit. I'm choosing a colorful outfit. Yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy.
Oh,
Friday,
thank God.
Friday,
Good.
Friday. Yeah.
right? No, I'm actually very excited because, as I said a couple of times before, I think the part that I am more interested in right now in my career is discussed today on the final day, and you'll see why. Uh, okay, Maria is also three. Maria is also on three as I am. But I'll try to make the presentation. I think you have noticed I try to take a heavy load out of it and to make it enjoyable at least. Um, so let's get into it because we are finishing part four, developing communicative skills, with the one we started yesterday before leaving, which is writing. And here we're talking about writing as a process. Probably this is something you're familiar with because this is a very common approach. But this is something we can say like common sense, right? What we say in Spanish, el sentido común es el menos común de los sentidos. And so writing as a process is probably a well-known approach, but is not applied as often as we think, or maybe it is applied, but more of a something mechanical, uh, forgetting about the actual purpose of using writing as a process in teaching languages. Um, let's remember that we're talking about writing in a holistic way, in a way that it includes not just decoding, but also emotional aspects, contextual aspects. And so we're talking here about writing as a process in the same way, talking about making meaning through language. But you see, it also involves other things like emotion, context. So if there are many things going, so many things happening in our
Ay,
brains. You can imagine how or
¿qué
why writing
pasó?
sometimes is overwhelming
Hay
for
luz.
students, right? So we are looking at writing here as both as a tool for learning and also as a way, as a tool for expression. Um, I don't know about your experience. We will get there to talk about writing, but as I said, we have some guiding questions for us here. So the first one: why do we teach writing as a process? Well, because writing is recursive or should be recursive. It shouldn't be a punishment. It shouldn't be something you do because you have to. And also, it is not linear because our thoughts are not always, like this. And this is something it's particularly personal for me because I am a very distracted person. Um, I'm really, really distracted. And even I attended college. One of my majors, I studied with my mom. And it was interesting for her. I mean, because she has many uncomfortable conversation and horrible arguments with teachers in high school, for example, because I used to skip classes, I didn't pay attention, I didn't take notes because I was always thinking of something different. I didn't want to be there. Um, so writing, in a way, was kind of a challenge for me because it was an uncomfortable situation. It is comfortable for people like me, and also for people, again, maybe you're wondering about your experience, or maybe the experience of people when writing has even been a punishment. As I said before, I have friends who studied at Catholic schools, and I am not that old. And this was more common in the past. That's why I make this comment. But when they said, "Oh, do you made a mistake? You need to write the correct sentence 1,000 times so you remember, or you did something wrong, so you're going to write it down, the famous plan as we have." So if we have this kind of situation when we're conceiving or we're looking at writing as recursive, not linear, writing as a process is a way to help students organize ideas that are usually disorganized and to make them approach a task that maybe they don't even know, but with a plan, something they can do to overcome the resulting difficulties. It allows for growth over time. This is a great example, probably, well, in some cases at least, where you can see progress in a more evident way than in speaking. Because and also an example of how a guided effort can be very successful. Because of course, we always say the only way to improve the way to improve writing is by writing. Yes, of course, it's practice. But this is like I told a student a long time ago. She said she promised to make an effort. And I said, what kind of effort? I asked her. She was with her mom. And she said, no, no, the biggest effort I can. I said, yes, of course, but you can make the biggest effort ever by trying to push this wall here, and you won't move the wall. So what I was trying to say, and I explained this to her, is yes, it is about making an effort. It is about practicing, but guided practice, something that helps you focus your attention on the right things. And then this is another important thing to keep in mind when we talk about writing as a process. We're trying to get rid of this idea of writing as a one-shot performance again, because you have to, because this writing is part of the program. Yes, this is not the way we want to look at writing. Also, because here, remember, we have been talking a lot about the this apparent dichotomy between the process versus the product, and we have insisted a lot on we are supposed to focus on the process, because the process is where things are actually happening. When you are looking at the product, this is the end of a learning cycle, if you want. So if we are interested in the process, well, here, when we use writing, or when we teach writing as a process, we're emphasizing the process, which of course reduces the anxiety and builds agency and resilience. This is not we're sorry, avoiding the situation of them sitting there waiting for a grade, or this is even worse, because writing, you can get a paper, and I am guilty again. This is a mistake I made in the past, of a lot of corrections, lines here, lines there, circles and side notes. So if you're just sitting there as a student waiting for that to happen, that's horrible. Of course, you will feel anxious and even a little scared of the teacher, especially if you are using red. I like using red, by the way. This is another side note, but I nowadays I don't do it to highlight mistakes as such, but I do it to make contrast. This is more of a strategy to appeal to their cognitive side, or to their mental processes, not just because I want to make it look mean. Another reason to teach writing as a process is because it mirrors how writing works in real life, because it can be really messy, it can be iterative, it can be purposeful, all at the same time. If you don't know how to write a letter, probably you will be going back and forth, especially if you don't have the assistance of an AI tool or somebody who actually knows how to write the letter. But again, this is resembling real life. This is focusing on the process, and this is a way to encourage our students' improvement, and also to give them a plan to succeed, when, especially for those who don't have any writing habits, don't know how to write most things, don't like it, have had negative experiences. So there are many reasons, as you can see, to approach writing as a process in our teaching. Um, there are challenges, okay, and probably we were very punctual with the other skills, but when we're talking about writing, considering how writing can be so stressful, and this is based on evidence, okay? If you studied at Sevan, probably maybe you like writing and you succeeded there, but probably you also noticed how most of your classmates didn't really like writing, didn't make an effort. They didn't like the moment when they were told they were expected, or they were going to write. So based on that evidence, we decided to put more attention here, to focus a little more on the challenges we have here. And actually, we will have like there's something really interesting here, because we will have the challenge and some strategies like right after, because we divided the challenges into different categories, different types of challenges. So let's start with cognitive challenges in writing. So yes, we're talking about mental processes, cognitive functions. In this case, some of the most common challenges include limited vocabulary or grammar range, what they know versus what they are, quote unquote, supposed to know, according to the level. difficulty organizing ideas logically. This is something I have talked about with Miguel many, many times, because this is like pidiéndole peras al horno, diría el filósofo de Zulia. Um, if you in general have a problem or you are not very good at organizing ideas logically, how can you expect that to happen in a writing task when you are practicing your second language? Uh, so this is a big issue here. This is something we don't really think about that often, especially because one very common mistake as teachers, and that is something I have discussed with many teachers as a no-no. This is you should never take for granted what the student knows. You cannot say, no, because you're in level 4, you are supposed to understand and use the zero on the first conditional, for example, because that's in level 3. Yeah, well, not necessarily. As I said the other day, even in high school to pass, you don't need to get a 20. You are not supposed to know everything in high school to pass. The same happens in college. You probably don't know the whole program entirely perfectly. Probably there are things you are still struggling with. So keep that in mind, please. Another challenge here from the cognitive point of view, lack of awareness of text structure. So they don't really know the difference or the expectations or the conventions for each text they are writing. Trouble revising or self-motivating. This is having a lack of self-awareness, but more specifically of meta-linguistic awareness. This is why I said yesterday that one of the biggest steps forward we have in our field is when the student starts noticing their own mistakes. Um, that reduces our job, but that also shows, more importantly, that shows agency and self-awareness. Over-reliance, another very common issue, over-reliance on translation or the use of the structures from their first language. And it can work. I mean, we shouldn't demonize the use of the first language, as I have said several times now. But at the same time, it shouldn't become the resource for the student. It should be a help in some cases, something you should or you can use in a given situation, but not something you do frequently. And as soon as in level 1, they have this shock. I'm talking about the adult courses, when they say or they ask, what is the meaning of do or does? And usually the answer is like, okay, what do you care about that? That's not the point here. Um, or this is just a different language. Not everything has, you are not going to have a translation for everything. But in writing, that can be an issue, especially when you are trying to push them to use more advanced structures, because that's when things become really messy. Some strategies for these challenges, use sentence starters, guided outlines. This is something I have seen a lot at Sevam, but this is not just show them, but this is not about just showing it. This is more of making it a habit. If this is the way we are expecting them to, or the plan we are expecting them to follow, well, work on that to make it a habit. And the same happens both for paragraph structure, for instance, or for the 5 paragraph essay structure, but also general for grammar. Another recommendation or possible way to go is providing general models. Of course, if you don't really know about this, how to write an argumentative essay, we should maybe read one, but not like we said yesterday, talking about reading. Not okay, take it. No, if we are going to read an argumentative essay to show them how to write an argumentative essay, that should be scaffolded as well. Um, what else do we have here? Integrate vocabulary banks. I need to do something here really quickly. Okay, so I'm gonna show you here. Give me a second. This is kind of an urgent thing. Give me a I'm sorry for the interruption. Let me continue here. Interrelating vocabulary banks and grammar checklists. This is something I tried like literally before traveling. Um, I had, for instance, a session of students having or reviewing their own mistakes, and then they did it in pairs. But this is something you should handle with care because it can be intimidating. I did it because I already knew the group. I knew there was a strong learning community there. So I asked them to look for the mistakes in their partner's paragraphs. That can be horrible, but they did it without an issue. But then I did it like a group discussion. I was not a part of the discussion because the point was building on their self-awareness. And I told them to then list the 10 most common mistakes or issues they found in their paragraphs. And then I took those 10 issues, I rewrote them, of course, to make it more positive, like uh, omits this, like, okay, we tried to use a more positive wording. And then that became a checklist. So for the rest of the writing task for that level, I barely corrected. I think I corrected the last two of them. You say how many of them because it was a passages level. Um, and there was a lot of self-assessment there because I gave them the checklist. And remember, the checklist is very simple. Is the thing there or not? Yes, no, yes, no. So the person consistently uses the yes when talking about he, she, it in the present simple. Yes, okay, there you have it. You have a yes. And then they have their own grade there. They assign their own grade. This is a way I was trying to scaffold their, as I said, their self-awareness and to make them analyze the text to become more critical as well, without me being the one telling them, because I noticed they were super nice to me. We had a very nice community, but when it came to writing, they were kind of intimidated. That's just an example. I'm not saying it was perfect. It required some refinements as an exercise, but this is somehow what this point here tries to show. Then we can also encourage drafting and revision. This is an integral part of writing as a process, right? Understanding that the first thing you write usually is not the one you are going to submit. And this applies to many fields in life. Even a very obvious and kind of silly example is when you have a romantic interest, probably if you're sending a message, you don't just say, okay, this, take it. Most people make a pause and take a moment to reflect on how the message will land once it is received. And that's planning and that's drafting. And you have more, well, in most cases, it is more likely for you to succeed when you do that. And to avoid, for example, to avoid this thing with the use of L1, writing frames, filling the gap, tasks to build fluency, organize a paragraph, but as long as it is scaffolded and the scaffolding is as it is supposed to be temporary. Remember, a super important part of scaffolding is the fact that it is specific, it is targeted, and it is temporary. Because, you know, if in the other way around, if you do it all the time, they get used to having that support. And the idea is promoting their independence. Then the second category of challenges we have is affective challenges. You can imagine this is something we have been discussing a lot because we have talked a lot about the emotional aspect of learning. Emotional barriers, including fear of making mistakes or being judged. I said this happened to me 3 months ago before coming here. It happens. Even if you have a strong community, maybe they say, oh, the teacher is super nice. I am not saying they said it, but maybe their thinking was the teacher is very nice. I like him, but when it comes to writing, you see, it's not horrible because there's a good bond, but at the same time, it's not the best position either because they still don't feel confident enough to make mistakes. Um, Another possibility, low confidence in language or ideas, especially if writing has been a punishment for them in the past, or if their accomplishments as writers have been undermined by others, or just they haven't received any recognition when they accomplish something as a writers in their education. Negative past experiences, this is something I said before regarding writing itself or being corrected in very harsh ways. Anxiety around performance or grades. You know, many people in Venezuela, like it or not, are obsessed with grades. So you can talk to them and say, okay, maybe you got not your grade was not so good, but that doesn't mean the end of the world. That means there's room for improvement. But they just see the 8 out of 20, and that's the end of it. And resistance to self-expression or vulnerability. That happens, okay? Uh, this is the importance of knowing your students to understand that, oh, he's so reluctant. Or you say, okay, I know there's a situation happening there, and this is when differentiation is important as an approach to teaching. Recommendations. Psychologically safe spaces. What I think it was Maria Virginia last time who said it this way. That's it. Normalize mistakes, celebrate efforts, and model vulnerability. Uh, Use low stakes writing task. You don't have to jump into the 5 paragraph writing, right? The 5 paragraph structure paragraph. You can even use anonymous responses for certain tasks. Either ways, you probably know who's writing what, if you know your students. Um, Offer choice again for the topic, for the format, differentiation. Give growth focused feedback, highlight progress, not just errors, and share your own writing struggles. I always remember the same observation, the same correction I received from my professor at ULA, Lectura y Escritura del Inglés uno. We have two of them. She always said to me, escribes oraciones muy largas, tienes que hacer oraciones más cortas. It was all the time. Every time I submitted an assignment, I got the same message back. Well, I didn't really pay attention to that because it also depends on your personality, of course. But this is something I always remember. And when I started working at Seva, I don't know if you know, but our boss and our executive director, Michelle Lee, she's from the US. She has lived in Venezuela, of course, for a long time. She's a founding member of Seva, and she has studied a lot. I mean, she has a high academic profile. And you can imagine the kind of mental block I had when I started writing reports for her or other things for her. And she's not like this, okay? She's very tough. And she started correcting the first one I gave her and told me, what's this? Why are you writing like this? What's this? What's this? But I noticed some of the things she was correcting was that the sentences were too long. And when sentences are too long, they kind of lose the point in English. I still remember. And the thing is, I still share that story with students. So they see it's not, and I would never say I am like a super expert writer, but I am a competent writer. And the only way I got to be a competent writer is because I worked on my personal challenges regarding the task. So this is about humanizing the process. Then build peer support. This is something we have also talked about in the past, but the important word here is protocols. You can use peer editing, for instance. They can work in pairs or in groups, but you need to teach them how to do it, because if you just put them in pairs or divide the class into pairs and you say, okay, give each other feedback without further instructions, that's not doing anything. Probably they will say, oh, this is nice, or this is perfect, or I completely understood your text. Even if you give them discussion prompts, probably if they haven't been trained, that activity won't take you anywhere with most of your students. So it is better if you train them against scaffolding, the importance of scaffolding. You can train them. Like the first time they work in pairs to give each other feedback, you give them prompts, but you also give them checklist, for example, or you can give them a Likert scale, and then they start checking, okay, this is here, this is here, this is not here. And then they have something to discuss. And remember, the idea with feedback is to make it focused, specific, so it can be operated, so the student can work on it. Okay, so this is why we talk here about reviewing protocols, about giving them specific protocols to make that feedback useful or to make that activity work as it should work. The third category here, talking about challenges, is contextual, the reality where we're in which we are teaching. The class, large class sizes is a problem. Of course, in writing, that's horrible. And this is one of the reasons why some teachers just choose not to assign written assignments, because then you say, oh my God, how many paragraphs I'll be correcting if I have 15 students writing 5-paragraph essays. That's a lot. And unfortunately, our job has one of those things, right? We are just expected to use our free time working because in the end, if you're correcting, that's correcting, that's working. In limited time, especially if you want to really do it as a process. That can be an issue, of course. That's not a secret. Lack of access to authentic models. I think at Sevan, we don't have this particular problem, but it can happen. Inconsistent expectations across subjects or levels. This is one big problem, and this is not only at Sevan, this happens everywhere. I think if we think back of college or high school, we know some professors or some teachers were very strict. Some others didn't even, attend classes. They didn't take they didn't use the attendance list. So this happens everywhere. And we know this at Sevan, and this is one of the reasons why we are trying and being the channel to promote a more balanced approach among our teachers regarding everything. First, the identity we're trying to build, for example, here in our course, but then the teaching approach. We know we are all different. I have said the communicative language teaching approach is like a continuum. You can be more on a more flexible side or on a more strict side, but the important is that you use the philosophy to make your teaching communicative. Okay, and also we're talking about this. I know, for example, now that Alba mentioned Andres, well, some time ago today, Andres is one of those teachers who really pay attention to writing. He uses the teaching as a process approach. He's very communicative in classes. He uses a lot of mini projects and so on. So this is he's my friend, of course. This is not because he's my friend, but because I know how he teaches, and I can say, okay, you see, we want something like this in the classroom, but that achieving that consistency is difficult because every teacher is different. Pressure to focus on grammar or test preparation. Uh, this is tough. Okay, we'll see a recommendation for this because this also depends on the teacher's approach or the personal ideas he has on writing. Because if you think writing is writing symbols to send a message, that's kind of limited. You should remember what we have been discussing, that this is like a holistic thing. You have an integral process developing there. Personal backgrounds, ideologies, personal experiences in terms of how you have approached writing in the past. So focusing on grammar is very limited. Also limited the opportunities for feedback or revision, talking again about the size of your class, the time you have available. And of course, it is always nicer to have a one-on-one conversation with your student, but sometimes that's not possible. And that's it. So you need to think of alternatives. So I'm going to give you here a set of alternatives. Use short focus writing tasks. So if you see that you don't have time to write 5-paragraph essays, why don't you write something shorter and make it more effective instead of becoming obsessed with the 5 paragraphs? Design reusable templates. This is something I told you about a few days ago. Routines to save prep time, because again, when we are on our free time, we are expected to work. If you're planning something special, probably you're using your own time because you're paid for your time in the classroom. We are paid. Leverage peer review and self-assessment. As I said, this is a very useful thing if you don't have time to correct. And also, if you know that a few students don't really need that detailed, super attentive correction, you can give more attention to those you know that are struggling the most. Use real-world genres, of course, something they feel is doable. And this is probably talking about tests. The TOEFL, which is the one you take to study in the US at American institutions, it has 4 sections. It has the writing, the reading, the listening, and the speaking sections. Um, when I took the TOEFL in 2023, I was part of the final batch of people taking the old format, because now the writing section is different. Now one of the 2 texts they are supposed to write in the exam is an online post. Say, oh my God, how do you go from writing a 5-paragraph essay to writing a blog entry? Because we're living different times basically. And this, believe it or not, it is shorter, but then you're thinking about a virtual classroom, for example, and I was there as well. You need to know how to write that format, because that format is more common nowadays. Join the discussion, post your opinion on this video or these materials I gave you. So times are changing. Why shouldn't we adapt? Build mini writing stations or rotating tasks. You see what I said, differentiation is always a good friend to overcome these many issues. And incorporate writing into other skills, integrated skills, differentiated instructions, and then probably a post-reading reflection comes out more naturally than you asking them about their goals for the future. And in the end, your goal is to make them write, so you can help them develop the skill. And as the more realistic you do it and the more approachable you do it for them, the better and more reliable the assessment at the end will be. All right, we have one final category of challenges, pedagogical challenges. So this was thinking about us more specifically. Overemphasis on product. You see, this is a common point we have discussed several times. Lack of scaffolding. You see, this is another problem. This is on us. This is not on the student. This is us not giving them proper guidance and support. Feedback that's fake, when we say, okay, this is not good, or I didn't get your text, or this is not level appropriate. What's the student supposed to do with that comment, right? Like, okay, but what should I work on? No, 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 no. This is useless. Okay, no, I should quit or something. Maybe the tasks are irrelevant or disconnected from their learners' lives, and limited use of peer review. Because remember, we are focusing on communication. If you are using peer editing or collaborative writing, you are promoting communication. Remember, in the end, we are looking for ways of incorporating communication into everything. Communication is everywhere. Why would we fragment communication into speaking tasks? The idea is to promote a classroom where communication is common and frequent. So these are our mistakes. Fortunately, I'm guessing you can imagine the scaffolding, because these are things we have talked a lot during this course. Use scaffoldings like modeling, outlining, sentence frame, checklist, design relevant, purposeful tasks, provide timely and focused feedback. This is super important. I know this happens frequently, but if you are providing feedback at the end of the course, that's kind of useless. How's your student supposed to improve if you spend 6 weeks without saying a word about his writing? Um, Come on, guys, that doesn't make any sense. I know correcting takes time, and especially if you have bigger classes. But what's the point of writing a text if you don't give feedback uh, on time, so the student can use that feedback in the next writing tasks? And the same happens with the lack of focus. If you don't tell the student what to work on, what's the point of writing again? So you can say again, oh, this is useless. That's completely absurd. And then talking about drafts, you see, if you're using drafts, which is normal in teaching writing as a process, um, use it for your benefit. Instead of overwhelming them with a lot of expectations, you can concentrate. If this student has issues with paragraph structure, we'll concentrate on organization. Then grammar leave grammar aside for a moment and concentrate on this one. Incorporate peer review, but again, with clear roles and kindness protocols. Use rubrics or success criteria to clarify expectations. This is something many people, many teachers forget about. Remember to set clear expectations, and that includes something like a rubric. If your writing is being assessed, you should have, or you should know what is being assessed in your writing specifically. If you don't know how to make a rubric, which is normal because rubrics are sometimes a pain in the neck, you can ask for help. We have Andres, we have Miguel, you have me, you have my email. You can reach out to me once I'm back in Merida and so on. I think this is the final part of this section. And the final one is just to clarify what teaching as a process means, and this is why that's involved. Uh, when we talk about writing as a process, we're talking about writing, following 4 or 5. It depends on where the source you are checking. Uh, Basically, instead of jumping into writing, you should first plan your text. Remember, you should when you're planning, you are brainstorming ideas, you are doing your research, you are taking notes, and then you're outlining your text or using a graphic organizer to organize the way your text will be. This is coming up with a plan, basically. When we talk about drafting as a second stage, that means understanding that the first text is a preliminary version. That's not the final version, so you can give the student feedback. And also then you have the revision part, as I said, following all the recommendations I just gave you and reflecting. This is a step I would recommend, especially if you are trying to develop that kind of awareness in your students. That's a good idea, actually. So I'm going to give you some core practical moves here. Break tasks into stages, as I just said, planning, drafting, revising, sharing, or reflecting. Again, it depends on the source you are using. Use models and mentor texts to show what good writing looks like, build in revision time, and normalize rethinking. Give focused feedback at different stages, not just at the end. Encourage peer review and reflection to deepen learning, and celebrate growth and effort, not just the final product. Me fui de largo. Here, I want to make a pause because I want to have a zip here, but also to ask you how you're feeling on all of this huge amount of information.
Well, I feel like I've learned a lot. I didn't know that about the sentences that you were talking that uh, Mrs. What was her name? Michelle was correcting you. This essay and the sentences were too long. That's something maybe I heard from a teacher once and my mind discarded, but yeah, it totally makes sense. And well, I that's not the only thing I've learned, of course. That's the newest, but I've learned a lot through this process.
Thank you, Fiorina. Maria Virginia, do you have any comments or should we just move on?
Hi, good morning. I think good. It's been very useful knowing all of this. Maybe if anything later, I might ask you how to make the checkpoint lists because I feel like that's a very, very good tool to use, particularly to let them know what is being evaluated. Because I can tell them like when we're working on writing with my students, I can tell them like, okay, we're working like with this unit, this is the topics of the lesson. I'll give them the lesson and then I'll tell them, okay, we have to write this using the things that we learned in the lesson. Fine. But I feel like for them, it would be better if they knew specifically what they have to work on. When it comes to the order in which maybe the sentence should be structured, or mostly that. I feel like they mostly struggle with that because they're still beginners, so they just put words together and see what comes out, see what sticks. So a checklist will help them know, oh yeah, this doesn't go here, this go here. It's like a more structured way for them to remember what the corrections are.
Thank you, ladies. And yeah, I completely agree. We can talk about that when I'm back, or you can even send me a message and maybe I can share some materials. Either ways, if you have access to my teaching folder at Sevam, the one I told you about before is there. If you can look for checklists for writing tasks or something like this, and or you can ask Andres so he can look for it. Or I can even see if I have it here in my computer. So yeah, that will be good, because it can also it can even work for yourself. I mean, uh, I I never had that one physically, like on a piece of paper, but I had like kind of my mental, and I still have kind of a mental checklist of things that I know I need to work on, because this is like a lifelong process. I am not, I don't know, I'm not Garcia Marquez. I am not Vargas Llosa. I know I need to keep an eye on certain things when I'm writing. And as I said, this is a lifelong process. So thank you, ladies. We can move on here then really quickly to give you a couple of recommendations because we have insisted on providing effective feedback. So we have a certain set of principles, let's say, to guide us. As I said, make it timely while the writing is still fresh, while still it makes sense. If you know, if you're teaching at passages, I insist on passages because in the first four levels, this is more flexible. You can plan the writing task basically to benefit yourself, to know, okay, next week they are going to write this, blah blah blah. But with passages, they are supposed to write six texts. So if this is the super intensive, that is six texts in 4 weeks. If it is intensive, this is in 6 weeks. I'm not talking about the semi-intensivo or the regular because these guys haven't reached those levels. But if you know they are expected to write basically one paragraph or text per week, you should be ahead of them and you should plan the time to correct and to give them feedback while the feedback is still useful. To make it focused, again, if you correct everything, especially if the student is struggling, um, that can be overwhelming. As I said, like lines everywhere, and then they, oh my God, I never want to write a text again. Actionable, as I said before, something doable. Clear suggestions, not just saying this is bad, this is a mistake, but okay, try to do this, or remember that in English we need a subject, for example. Um, kind, this is very American. Use language that builds confidence and models respect. Yeah, I think I already told you something about this in the past. Balanced, highlight strengths as areas to improve. So this is not supposed to be entirely negative. You can also praise, remember, praise effort, praise growth, invite reflection, questions and revision, not just passive acceptance. And this is why I said that having a one-on-one conversation when you are giving feedback, especially on writing, that's a very convenient situation because you can encourage the student reflection directly. And then tips for practice, you see the 2 stars and a wish. This is a very American format to give feedback to avoid making the entire thing negative. You can use the other one is this is the one I was thinking of. It's like praise, question, recommend, or something like this. I don't remember. Now, this is very American as well. That when you start giving feedback, you don't directly start talking about negative things. You first praise. Okay, I like what you did with this. I think it was very interesting that you talked about this, or this is a very nice way to put this here. I was wondering, you see, if here you were trying to say something like this or like this. And then you say, I would think that it is a nice idea if you next time you try something like this. You see, that's very different from saying this is horrible, you shouldn't write again in your life, and so on. And give feedback at different stages, not just, as we said, the importance of focusing on the product. As I said, use rubrics or success criteria. You see, success criteria is also trying to use positive vocabulary. Some may say this is like a euphemism, but it doesn't have to be. This is just trying to make things more accessible, more approachable for our students to make the situation feel more welcoming. Uh, clarify expectations so they know what's expected. And again, the importance of peer feedback, but with protocols. And frame feedback, this is also related to the way we use our vocabulary and the way we manage the class itself. Frame feedback as part of the learning process, not as a time to be judged by the teacher or your partner. That being said, we can move on to part five. I told you at the beginning that we would have a lot to cover today, but now I'm seeing here that we are doing great time-wise. I told you last day included the topic I am more interested in nowadays, and this is one of the reasons why it was a good idea for me to become a teacher trainer. I like being a teacher trainer because I'm really interested in these three topics that are included in part five. We're talking about going from practice to growth, that is assessment, but mostly uh, what we will see after assessment. So assessment in EFL, Miguel's request, and also because I have talked about that so much, I'm giving you here some pointers, okay? So first, I said some teachers don't like assessment, okay? Some teachers have very negative words regarding assessment or when they talk about assessment. But assessment, I mean, I'm a teacher. I majored as a teacher, and I have always understood that assessment is an integral part of the learning process. Okay, but the thing is the connotation the word has received, especially in places like Venezuela, when we think assessment is taking a written exam and having a teacher telling you you are useless and that you shouldn't live anymore. Um, so first, we need to assess to understand what learners are and with what they need next. If not, what's the point of having us there? To tell people horrible things or to guide them to overcome challenges so they can reach their goals. This is something you can do by assessing them. Also, to get your teaching decisions and support learner. How do you know? And this is, remember, we're talking about three main types of assessment. Even in Spanish, they have the same names. En español también hablamos de evaluación diagnóstica, formativa y sumativa, which sounds very technical, but in practice, it's actually quite obvious. So first assessment we have is to diagnose, to see what we're facing in the classroom, what kind of students we have, their backgrounds, their knowledge, their proficiency, their interest. That's assessment. That's not negative. And interestingly, many teachers who don't like to assess their students because they think this is like a punishment and blah, 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 blah. You say, well, but you are indeed assessing your students when you are asking them questions. That's assessment. And when you have that kind of assessment, when you have that kind of information, you can help them grow, right? You plan accordingly. That's an essential aspect of the way we are trying to teach. If you consider the information we have in the course, everything we have seen throughout the days here. But then you have formative assessment, and the essence is the same. The idea is to see how they are doing. Is the program being successful? Are they understanding that in the present simple they are supposed to do some changes when they are speaking or when they are writing? They can, or they should structure ideas in a kind of different way. You know that through formative assessment. And again, that's important for your teaching decisions because this is when you say, okay, I've been doing the checklist thing, but it's not working. I need to do something different before the end of the course. And this is also why you need to do this on time, right? Do it timely, because then you are giving your students time to change the course, their direction, but you can also do it to see, okay, this is not working at all. I need to try something else. And this is actually supporting learning. And then at the end, of course, the one that nobody seems to like is summative assessment is going to inform us if what we did, all of these the changes, the decisions were effective or not, if they actually helped the student, or if the student was able to use these resources and lessons to accomplish what he was expected. To help learners notice progress and set goals, what I just said, to document achievement for institutional purposes. This is super important. How do you know a student should be promoted? Because you assess the student. This is an integral part of the process, I insist. And this is not to blame anyone. I insist. This is not, oh, no, 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 you had a horrible level 3. I already said how this is not exactly like, oh, you should know everything because you already passed the level. And learning a language is also a perfectly or a super complex process. And this is even useful when you're trying to press your students. Two complementary types of assessment, as I said, formative assessment is supposed to be ongoing. La famosa, si recordamos el liceo, la famosa evaluación continua, ongoing assessment, formative assessment. And low stakes, this is low stakes, it means you are not determining if you are being promoted, you're just checking progress, literally. This is why we are saying, we are calling it growth oriented. Then you have summative assessment, which is different. This is something, the end point. This is the end point of evaluation of achievement. This is the word here. This is why we talk about achievement. So formative or summative. I said before, in my opinion, this is a false dichotomy. Okay, but let's go over this first. Formative assessment is assessment for learning, assessment for guidance, to let students know how they are doing, right? It happens during learning, not after. It reduces anxiety and builds confidence. It supports process writing, reading strategies, and speaking practice, especially because it allows you to go back and check how things are going again. It encourages reflection, autonomy, and metacognition. A repeated goal, I have said, metacognition, metalinguistic awareness. Um, why should be used to encourage reflection? Because you are there, right there. Using writing as an example is perfect, because then you can say, okay, guys, let me sit down with you and say, okay, last time you were doing this, you were doing this. How do you think you did this time? And then the student can see using the checklist, the hypothetical checklist, like, I think again my sentences were too long. So, all right, how would you change that? You see, that's encouraging reflection and metacognition, as well as autonomy, agency, and so on. A formative assessment helps teachers adjust instruction in real time. You don't have to wait till the end to know something is not working out properly. On the other hand, on the one hand, we have assessment for learning, informative assessment, but we have assessment of learning, and that's the big difference. So this one provides accountability. You say, who's responsible for what? It sounds horrible that way, but that's the easiest way to look at it, I think. Because when when the student doesn't reach the goal, there are many possible explanations, but one possible explanation is that the teacher didn't do his or her best job, right? The certification, if you are looking for a certification, um, it helps institutions, sorry, track progress. How do you know if the student is competent if you don't try it? And then how do you give a certificate? It motivates learners. Wanting it or not, it is a kind of motivation. This is one of well, I'm here also talking about why, in the summative assessment part, why we are redesigning at CEBAN the written assessment instruments. Because in Venezuela, those are motivation, even because it's maybe because the students are scared or because they are just trained that way in the education system in Venezuela. But the important part is for most of them, this is the only time during the course when they actually sit down and study. That's it. we should use that for our benefit. Our benefit is the students' benefit. Of course, our benefit is being more effective in what we do, and as a consequence, that's providing a better providing our students with better teaching, learning experiences. It can be fair, transparent, and humane when aligned with goals. You see, this is also involved. This is very important. And this is taking us to the next slide, uh, which is probably the most important part here. As I said, this false dichotomy between formative and summative, in my case, in my opinion, is a waste of time. Both of them are necessary. Both of them have their own purpose, and both of them are of great help for us if we do it properly. And for our students, remember, when I say for us, this is something that, after all, influences our students' learning process. So recommendations, make it clear. Okay, that's good assessment when expectations are understood. And also how they will be evaluated, procedures. So expectations and procedures, as we always say, make it transparent. This is the importance of showing them the criteria, the rubrics, the checklist, so they know what's considered an indicator. They should be visible and explained. Make it fair. The task matches the learner's level, needs, and instructional context. If you only use one class to teach the third conditional, assessing that is kind of rough, right? Not really fair. Supportive feedback helps learners grow, not just identify errors. Remember, this is the grade is not the end. The grade is not the goal. The goal is to make that grade, talking about summative assessment, for instance, to make it something meaningful and useful for his learning progress or for his learning process. Then make it inclusive, considers diverse backgrounds, abilities, and learning preferences. This is more difficult to standardize because to have summative assessment with differentiation is possible, but it's significantly more difficult. Either way, this is something we're working on, and this is why also the new quizzes, the new exams, actually, the new written exams have, yes, they do have a grammar section because grammar is a part of communicative competence, but they also have a listening section, a writing section, and a reading section. Um, Multiple ways of input, right? And finally, good assessment at SEVAM and anywhere looks like something aligned with their learning goals, with the students' learning goals, with the classroom practices and institutional requirements. If students are not practicing in the classroom, are not reading or practicing the reading in the classroom, and then having an exam with a long reading, that's not fair and that's not alignment. But in that case, I think the CTA, the call to attention would be for the teacher because as you see, we have been telling you here about a philosophy. We have insisted a lot on integrated skills. So why aren't you practicing your reading with your students? Of course, according to the level, you're not going to read a novel in book one or in level one. So when we talk about alignment here, we're talking about alignment with two things at SEVAM, with SEVAM's institutional goals and with the communicative language teaching approach. That's our main guideline. So how do you align assessment with this? When you're focusing on meaning, not just accuracy, okay? Learners show what they can do with the language. It reflects, this is CLT. It reflects real world tasks. It values process as well as the product. Um, then encourages learner agency. It promotes self-assessment, goal setting, and reflection as an integral part of the process. So this is it. This is what I can tell you about assessment. Do you have any questions? Any comments? If not, we can move on. We are near, kind of near the end of our course. Um, Thank you, Perina. Thank you, Maria. Next topic is critical thinking. Okay, I think we have seen it on our slides a couple of times, but it is a very common reference when we are talking about teaching. This is a topic that is of this is a very interesting topic for Miguel, and it is also to me a very important topic. Um, but I think it's sometimes kind of mystified. People talk about critical thinking as if it was, I don't know, something out of this world. And it is actually embedded on everything we have discussed so far regarding the cognitive aspect of the process. In a few words, critical thinking is a way of thinking that uses deliberate reasoning, so it is intentional, and impartial analysis, so it is supposed to be objective to solve problems. So critical thinking is a way of thinking intentionally and objectively to solve problems. Uh, so it includes both logical skills that can be taught. So can you teach critical thinking? Yeah. You can model it as a teacher, but you can also encourage it. Encourages. You can also encourage it in your students. I'm sorry. It is a reflective, open mindset that can be cultivated. As much as writing is a lifelong learning process, critical thinking is a permanent exercise. And the more you use it, the more skilled you become. Uh, this term was coined by John Dewey. I hope no. I guess you have heard of him in his work How We Think. You see, more than 100 years ago, referring to an active, persistent, and careful consideration of a belief or supposed form of knowledge. So you see, he's already going back to this being an active exercise, a permanent exercise, something you cultivate. Interestingly, it became central to a movement in the United States called the Progressive Education Movement. And this is interesting because look at their premises back then, last century. Emphasize student-centered learning, experiential activities, and real-world problem solving. And rejected rote fixed memorization in favor of critical inquiry, collaboration, and personal growth. This is what we have been discussing since day one. So this went completely against the dominant learning psychology theories, behaviorism, right? We learn by developing habits, and these habits are basically built on a punishment and reward system. So a lot of memorization and a lot of automation. Uh, if this is your input, this is your output. That was pretty much it. These people back then were already saying this, which is what we believe in right now. And this is why I told you that critical thinking tends to be like mystified, but it is not supposed to be something so difficult or complex to understand. Um, and this is why I'm going to give you the following information to get a little bit, since we're professionals here, we're to discuss it a little bit further. We're talking about Lay's report for Pearson Publishing. I don't know if you have seen Pearson's Publishing, very famous. She has this famous report on critical thinking. You know, critical thinking as it is considered nowadays, not 100 years ago. She says here in her work that it has uh, three sides, let's say, coming each one of them from a different field. So the first one, as probably you guessed it, is related to philosophy. You know, Plato, Aristotle, and many other philosophers throughout history talking about logic and reasoning and argumentation and so on. Uh, so yeah, from a philosophical perspective, critical thinking focuses on logic, reasoning, questioning assumptions. Remember René Descartes, for example, talking about uh, this systematic doubt on everything, like questioning everything, questioning assumptions to find the truth, and you see, or to seek clarity. And so you see, this has been critical thinking is an integral part of this philosophy or the way philosophers think or tell people to think. Also, it has a psychological side or a perspective from the psychology field. It emphasizes cognitive processes. You know, when we talk about problem solving, yes, we talk about how we process information and how we come up with an answer, uh, and how people interpret information before emitting a response. And of course, there is also a side of education. After the first two were already mainstream, let's say, especially the philosophy aspect of it, the philosophical aspect of it. Education has this inherent quality of being a field of application. We build on many things. If you consider education connects with anthropology, sociology, um, planning, psychology, many things that, of course, because all of them are connected to us, an aspect of human existence, um, and that includes critical thinking and philosophy. So in education, applying these two versions or two phases of critical thinking, we say that in education, we apply critical thinking to real learning when we help our students inquire, reflect, make their own decisions, and to have to make them solve real problems. So you see, once again, everything we have said is connected to critical thinking. We're promoting this. You can even think back, going back to Bloom's taxonomy and cognitive challenge, because all of those contributions we discussed in the past are connected to this. When you are challenging the student and putting the student in a position in which they need to reflect, they need to analyze, they need to make deliberate decisions and to solve a real problem. That's promoting critical thinking. That's critical thinking at work. Um, so we can very quickly mention 6 pillars. They have already been mentioned. This is why I'm going over this very quickly. So you can wonder if these pillars, when you're planning a lesson, uh, you consider these 6 aspects. Are they questioning everything? Are they uh, required to have their own interpretation on something? Are they reasoning? Are they justifying opinions? Are they this is typical of debates. You see perspective taken, uh, even in the model of the United Nations. That's a big project because, as you can see, it has a lot of tasks, of course, from a pedagogical perspective, but also on a different pedagogical perspective. You see how it really, really promotes critical thinking, and that's a common aspect of task-based learning, task-based instruction, and project-based learning. So why is it important? Again, this is quick because this is something we have seen a lot during the course. It is essential because language is not neutral. It carries assumptions, perspectives, and power. This is what is being more discussed in the US in recent times, critical theory. Um, so if we know language is not neutral, why shouldn't we or why wouldn't we help our students understand that? And how do you understand what's beyond the text itself? Using your critical thinking. Critical thinking also helps learners analyze, question, and express ideas, not just, we don't want them to just repeat whatever they are being thrown at, whatever being thrown at them, actually. It builds confidence, autonomy, and voice, even advocacy. This is also connected to power a lot when we talk about advocacy in the classroom. It supports deeper reading, for example, understanding tones, bias, inference, and authorial intent. You see, again, this is critical theory. This is going back to the way we analyze texts. What is the writer actually saying beyond the words he's using? Um, it prepares learners for real-world communication, not just test performance. This is an essential goal at SEBAM. Common challenges, of course, we have common challenges. I already mentioned one of the permanent challenges we face at SEBAM, which is the fact that our students are the product of a very flawed education system in Venezuela. So students may have high cognitive ability but low language proficiency. So they may be already capable of using their critical thinking, but they don't have the language tools to show it. Another possibility is that cultural norms, they may discourage questioning or disagreement. You can imagine how that's happening in many cases in Venezuela. People are not even discouraged. They are just not used to questioning or to disagreeing with established rules or procedures. Um, in other countries, this also happens, of course, but this is our specific context. Teachers may feel pressure to cover content rather than explore ideas. Um, if you're just going through the slides, going through the motions, probably you won't consider anything about critical thinking, or you would say, yeah, you're here to learn English, not to become a political analyst. Yeah, but we are seeing here that this is not just because, that it is not just because, oh, yes, we want to promote critical thinking. We are saying here that critical thinking should be and probably is a permanent aspect of effective language learning. Okay. If you think about it, what I said on day one or day two about communicative language teaching, I said it covers, you are supposed to develop your students' communicative competence. Communicative competence includes different things. Grammar, yes, linguistic competence is one of them, but then you have strategic, and then you have sociocultural competence, and you have pragmatic competence. You see, the most complex ones are connected with critical thinking. When you understand context, biases, and so much more to actually use the language effectively and not just literally. And we have a little more, some practical strategies. You have, as I said before, if these sounded like Bloom's taxonomy, yes, we're referring back to it. So the strategies we saw for that one also are working for or in promoting your students' critical thinking. Scaffold, sentence frames, what we just saw. Normalize the I don't know yet as a valid response, or I don't understand that now. That's also building a psychological safety. Remember, encourage peer questioning, self-assessment, and multiple interpretations. And that's part of the beauty of open-ended questions in discussions. You are encouraging different interpretations out of the same text. And that's pretty much it. Again, could be a longer conversation, but this is the basis. We are covering the basis here because, as I said, we are on the final day and we need to finish the program. That's ironic, right? No, but we need to complete it so we can move on to other things. All right. So what's next? I'm going to give you the bottom line with critical thinking. It thrives on ambiguity. You see, multiple interpretations are possible, relevance when students care, and choice when they have a voice. So instead of asking for correct answers, design prompts that invite interpretation, judgment, and problem solving. You see, this is the core of promoting critical thinking, but at the same time, this is one of the pillars of CLT. So next time you're planning an activity, think about the following questions or the following prompts. I'm choosing this activity because I want students to compare ideas. Remember, backward design. Okay, I want them to be able to do this at the end. I don't want them repeating. They will compare. Maybe they will create a chart. But I'm worried it might be too hard for beginners. So scaffolding, you see, you go back. I want them to reach this point. How do I get them from where they are now to that point? By scaffolding. Are students making decisions or just following instructions? Remember, give them a choice. How can I change this from just following passively to actively engaging with the situation? Are they evaluating, comparing, or just recalling? You see Bloom's taxonomy. Are they being challenged the right way or aren't they? What's better for their learning at this specific point? Because remember, if they need recalling right there right then, that's okay. You are the one who needs to know that when you are planning. Is there space for disagreement, creativity, or reflection? You see, these are higher levels, uh, higher level functions. How could I include disagreement? How could I include creativity? How could I include reflection, even at the end of my lesson? Uh, you see, you're questioning yourself, and you're questioning what you're doing. So you're even using your own critical thinking there. And we're not only using our critical thinking, but we're also seeing there a sample of reflective teaching. When you are asking yourself these kind of questions in your work, you're reflecting on what you are doing as a teacher. And the question here, this is for you to think there. What changes when we make this kind of reflection? Is this asking them to reflect? If not, how or what can I include in the lesson to make them reflect at some point or to use their reflection skills? Um, this is now right here, right now. But what happens if we did this kind of reflection, or if we made this kind of thing happen all the time? This is what we call reflective teaching, and this is the point I told you is my biggest interest nowadays, because this is something that I think saved my teaching practices, something that since 2021 or 2022 probably has helped me improve a lot as a teacher, and I hope continue helping me improve as a teacher. What is it? I'm going to give you here a very simple analogy. Let's imagine that teaching is a performance. You say you're an actor, you're a singer, especially an actor, you're on a play. So let's imagine that if teaching is your performance as an actor, reflection is a rehearsal. So if this is a live performance, every class is a scene in which you are supposed to improvise, adapt, and respond. You shouldn't be there just following your plan. You should be there responding to your context and to what's happening. So without rehearsal, you keep repeating the same lines. In other words, for us, we are repeating the same mistakes. You are not paying attention to how students are responding. You are completely missing if they are responding negatively. And you go and do the same again. So you are repeating the same mistake because you are not rehearsing. Keeping the analogy alive here. So reflective teaching is your backstage moment. It is where you pause, where you replay. This is not to feel guilt or remorse or whatever. This is not just you analyzing. This is like sports. This is like athletes who watch videos of their performance and they notice they are throwing, they're having a bad technique, for instance, or they say, I need to improve the way I run. It is not as effective as it should be. This is exactly the same. So if many other people do it, why we teachers are not doing this kind of reflection? Okay, so when you make this pause as a rehearsal or as your backstage moment, uh, think about your practices, think about what you're doing in the classroom and ask yourself, did my activity, did my comment land the way I intended? Was my timing off? Maybe it wasn't the time to make a joke. Did I center the right characters or overlook something important? It can also happen, especially if I know, for example, there's a student struggling that needs more attention and I fail to give him or her that attention. Um, this is something you won't notice if you are not reflecting, if you're not replaying your performance in your head. What would I try differently next time? You see, this is something you can see when it doesn't happen, when it's obvious the teacher doesn't do it, and you can think of your uh, teachers, even college professors that every semester do the same thing. And then you as a teacher now can question, okay, why is this professor always using the same activities, the same strategies? If the students keep changing, each group is different. So something must be going wrong there because it is impossible. There are not exact, perfect recipes in education, and still this person is doing the same thing over and over and over again. Don't be that one, okay? No sean ese. So what I can tell you is, uh, or ask you is if reflection is rehearsal, how often are we rehearsing? This is exactly what I was just saying. Uh, Very quickly going over the origins of reflective teaching as a systematic, recognized practice. This is on Donald Sean. He published a very famous book in which he introduced the idea of reflection in action. So thinking and adapting while teaching and reflection on action. This is afterwards. He defined reflective practice as the ability to examine one's actions and decisions to improve effectiveness. This is basically assessing yourself, self-assessment for teachers, for practitioners. Sean emphasized that professionals learn not only from theory, but by systematically learning from experience. And this is why the format we have here online, we're expecting it to work because, well, first we expect you to watch all the videos and reflect on the content and apply it in your context, and then you getting into this cycle of reflection and practice. So this was in 83. I used to believe 83 was a few years ago, but now I understand that 83 was a long time ago, more than 40 years ago. So we have a more recent contributor to this framework or this approach, which is Jack Richards. I don't know if you remember, we talked about him before. Jack Richards, in reflective teaching in second language classroom, he talked about reflection as a way for teachers to collect data about their own teaching, you see, to examine beliefs and assumptions and use this for critical self-evaluation. Uh, he and many others have found, especially in more recent research, because I mean this topic has become so important in recent times that it's been researched a lot, especially in the global south. Um, there are many researchers on this in Vietnam, for example, in Africa, because teachers can get, they can be trapped in a comfort zone where they just settle with what they know and what they do and think that's perfect because if it has worked in the past, why shouldn't it work in the present? Uh, the thing is that assessing yourself, self-assessment is usually difficult. It is not easy to see your own flaws and mistakes. And this is in general in life. So as a professional as well. Um, and this is why Richards highlighted that reflective teaching helps move beyond routine techniques. You see, um, you are used to being in that situation and probably you even prefer being there because you don't want to face your mistakes. You don't want to ask what you did and why you did, um, because maybe the answer would be uncomfortable for you. So also because of this, he encouraged peer observation. So if you are not really into self-assessment, you can ask a colleague you trust to observe your classes, to analyze your teaching. Self-observation, as I said, this is being done in research. Maybe you can record yourself while teaching. Collaborative reflection is another tool Richards promoted. Um, Again, there are many research. I can think of one now where a teacher with a long experience teaching, like 15 or 20 years, she was recorded, of course, with her permission. This was a structured research situation, and they had interviews. They interviewed her. Because it was 4 or 5 researchers, they interviewed her. Then they recorded her, and then they gave her the opportunity to watch her own recordings with her in a conversation, and she was impressed by the things she noticed because she didn't imagine, not mistakes as such, but she had a very different view on the way she taught before. So her teaching practices changed after the study, and not that she became a completely different person, but she became more open to, well, first of all, assessing herself, but also to trying and implementing new things in the classroom to make it more welcoming and appropriate for her students. Um, the important part is that reflective teaching, as I said, is considered a systematic process of examining and questioning one's own practice, both in the moment and afterwards, so that teaching becomes intentional, adaptive, That's a key word for us, like it or not, and continuously improving. Um, Maybe that's one of the reasons why truly, I am truly aware, probably you notice, of the mistakes I have made as a teacher and the mistakes I keep making because I'm not perfect, of course, but because I'm permanently questioning myself and the things I do. Um, this conversation necessarily takes us to professional development, which is our last point. In the discussion, in the agenda, professional development is an intentional effort to grow as a professional. So you have workshops, reading, collaboration, experimentation. The key idea here is that this is not just about gaining knowledge or passively receiving information. Instead, it is about transforming practice, something that influences your professional practice in a positive way. So there's a connection, of course, between reflective teaching and professional development. Reflective teaching is the habit of looking back, right? As we said before, not to judge. This is just you trying to learn from your own mistakes and your own practices, asking questions why, like what worked, what didn't work, what might work if I tried it next time. And we said that professional development involves an intentional effort to grow as a professional in any way. So it is not just about going to a workshop and listening to a so-called expert. It is about your own practices. So what's the connection? Of course, without reflection, teachers repeat routines, even ineffective ones. I'm not saying that all routines are negative, but it is also impossible that all routines are positive. Without reflection, professional development risks becoming checklist. Yes, I went there, I read the materials, I listened to Ember, that's it. I'm a better teacher now. It doesn't work that way. With reflection, teachers notice patterns. I already gave you my own example. They question assumptions and make better decisions. I hope I'm making significantly better decisions nowadays. And over time, this leads to more confident, responsive, and learner-centered teaching. Okay. So, do you have any comments so far? That's the end of reflective teaching. We're close to the end of the session. I think we have like 2 or 3 more slides. You can type it in the chat or just let me move on in this beautiful day we're having today. Here you see we are talking now about professional development in scarce resource environments. So yeah, Venezuela. I have discussed the importance of this in Venezuela, the lack of resources in many contexts. Fortunately, at CEVAM, that's not exactly the situation. We have good support from a logistic, well, in academically speaking as well, but it can happen. I know there are more blackouts in Venezuela. There was one last night, I heard. So some recommendations, if you want to continue working as a teacher and becoming a better teacher in the future, some things you need to keep in mind in Venezuela is that there's a limited access to workshops, journals impossible in Venezuela. They are even difficult in the US. So here in the global South is even more difficult. They tend to be very expensive. Unfortunately, journals have become a big business. So it's a shame, but it also happens. So formal training opportunities are also limited. Heavy teaching loads and lack of institutional support. Well, Sevan is here giving you institutional support, and I'm always here offering you the support of Miguel and or Andres and mine. But teaching loads are still heavy, reliance on peer exchange, self-study, and creative adaptation. So in this context, reflection becomes even more important because it helps teachers maximize learning from everyday practice. So remember, one of the things in teaching or with teaching is that we are always learning. We are continuously learning from our students. They're always asking questions. We are constantly trying things that can land or not. But if you don't reflect on that, that's the same as nothing. The important part here is reflecting on that to see if it how it fits the teacher you would like to be. Reflection also turns informal experiences into professional growth. It encourages innovation with what is available. Maybe you already have the templates or you have the materials, the resources. You don't need to create new ones. You just need to think of an alternative use to make it more productive if you want. So this scarcity, and this is me talking based on my own experience again, can foster creativity and resilience when paired with reflective teaching. I said this is uh, why development as a TESOL professional matters. This is more specifically on us. It gives us identity and community even when resources are limited. Um, I can tell you again, based on my experience, when I was doing my master's in the US, they were usually impressed with my experiences, the way we teach in Venezuela, considering that sometimes we don't even have, like a socket in the classroom to connect a computer, or we don't even have the lights. We don't have light bulbs in many cases. Um, and also the experience, as I said the other day, with Sevan's community outreach program, we just went there ready to improvise and adapt. And this is like, that's a super appreciated skill, adaptation, and working under pressure. It shouldn't be necessarily like that, but this is to see that this can also lead to something positive, especially again if you reflect on the on your experience. So talking about the specific opportunities, the specific development opportunities you have as a TESOL professional, again, this is more, especially if you are willing or if you're interested in pursuing this as a lifelong occupation. Remember, in Venezuela, you have careers. Legally speaking, you have the military career and the education career, no, la carrera docente y la carrera militar. And that's how important we should be. Uh, Development as a TESOL professional means growing beyond the classroom, keeping in mind we're working in a constantly evolving field. Uh, some key points to consider: knowledge growth, staying current with research methods. This is part of what I'm doing here, informing you about the current state of the teaching approaches, current research, and so on. I hope I have achieved that. Identity, I told you this was like one of the main goals, if not the main goal here, building on your identity as a teacher, part of a professional community at Sevan, and part of an institution with a specific uh, purpose you are joining. Uh, at the same time, we are trying to build your agency, helping you, or we're trying to give you the necessary information you need to make choices about your career, contributions, your practices as a teacher and as a member, again, of a professional community. And we're also trying to make you think of the impact your growth can have on your students. Uh, Once again, considering that in Venezuela, we are in a very particular setting. Um, I'm going to give you now some pointers talking about communities of practice. This is something we are also interested in as EBAM. This takes time, but we are trying to help you guys build on this shared domain we have. We have the same interest, so why shouldn't we um, talk about it, right? Why shouldn't we build relationships through dialogue with our peers, collaborating, joint lessons, observing each other's class if possible, sharing tools, strategies, stories, what we know about students. All of this is part of building a community of practice. And there is a big benefit. Teachers gain perspective because, two heads are better than one, two minds, two different brains contributing. So this helps teachers gain perspective, feeling more encouraged, especially when you get the comments from your colleague, from your buddy telling you, okay, the activity didn't work that well, but I think it was very useful what you did here, here, here. It can work if we think of an alternative. You see, and then you are giving practical solutions to your partners, to your colleagues. And to finish, I'm going to give you here some communities of practice you can join beyond SEVAM. Okay, you can join TESOL International Association. This is the biggest, the most important Association of Teachers of English to Speakers of Other Languages. This is based in the United States. It is a global hub for professionals around the world. The international convention every year is a huge event, and there's a different place every year. I think last year was Long Island. It offers webinars, journals, and interest sections. They even have an online version of their international convention. You have many free resources, or you can have a discount because we live in a complex where if you want to pay for your membership. Actually, I am proud to say that my academic advisor from UMD is one of the is a member of the board of directors of TESOL International nowadays. Oh, I don't know if his period is still active, but he was elected, I think, like 2 years ago as a member of the board. So he's really into advocacy, especially. And he was also the president of Maryland TESOL. And that's why I became a member of Maryland TESOL. The open program, there you have the website. It is sponsored by the United States Department of State, and this is why it is accessible via the US Embassy nominations, or you have the other type, which are the open MOOCs. If you want more information about the open programs, I think one of you, maybe the two of you, already took one of those courses teaching English to young learners. My first open course was incorporating critical thinking skills into the multilingual classroom or something like this. That was like in 2020, 2021. Um, you can actually use it to build an international network of friends because there, of course, you have people from all over the place. I remember I had a friend, I completely lost contact with him, but I had a friend from South Korea. We became friends there. But again, if you want to take one more of those, or you want more information, just talk to Miguel or go to the website because some of them do require a nomination. Some other communities of practice you can join include what I said, TESOL associations everywhere. There are national and regional affiliates everywhere. I said Maryland TESOL there when I was studying at UMD, but even in Venezuela, we have VenTESOL, which stands for Venezuela TESOL. It is currently working toward reactivation with a history of conventions, or also national convention and teacher-led initiatives. Miguel is the vice president of TESOL, Venezuela TESOL. So if you want to have more information, ask Miguel as well. I think I can say I used to be a member before going to the US. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to contribute as much as I would have liked to, but they are working there, Miguel, to reactivate it. So talk to him if you want. Other useful communities, American English Live webinars. There you have the website. They also offer, again, live webinars, materials. This is, again, an American sponsored place. The U.S. Department of State also sponsors American English. This is why the domain says state.gov. And there you have other communities. You have Facebook groups, resource sharing, peer support. It's a matter of going there, asking ChatGPT or navigating, I don't know, TikTok or something to look for information. But I think these ones I have just given you already have a lot to navigate there if you are interested. So this is the end. I am already doing some extra time, but I warned you at the beginning that there was a lot to cover. So looking back, looking forward, we should keep in mind that reflection turns rooting into growth. This is when you truly say, um, I'm learning from my experience. I think it was John Dewey as well, the one who said that you don't learn from experience, you learn from reflecting on experience. We can also mention that professional development transforms practice, not just knowledge. The TESOL identity we're trying to build with you guys means belonging to a global, evolving field, both in the global north and the global south. As member, I'm still a member. My subscription is still valid with TESOL International. Miguel has attended several conventions. Andres attended a convention. Michelle has been there several times, of course. And it's an excellent place to see how you belong to a bigger thing. You're a member of a bigger community. Also, keep in mind that communities of practice are a good place to get support, perspective, and shared solutions. And the opportunities to keep learning exist even in a low resource setting like Venezuela. They are local, like TESOL, or they are global, like TESOL International, but they are also online. It is just, you need to go there and dive into it. So for today, take one idea, one community, or one opportunity you would like to explore in the future. That's for you. No, you don't have to tell me unless you want to, of course. And that would be your next step after finishing this workshop. Workshop, not this course. Also, I will give instructions for the final project um, later today or maybe tomorrow after I make some adjustments because I really I really wanted to give you guys time to breathe after today's session. That again, I knew was going to be kind of uh, dense if you want. Um, okay, Karina. So yeah, you can go. You saw there the website. Either way, you can find it easily. If you don't have any more comments, ladies, that's the end of our course. If you want to share a final insight, a comment, anything, go ahead and do it
Well,
now.
very quickly because I'm about to start to work. I'm really grateful for your time. You did it very well. I understood most of the material. I learned a lot. So, yeah, I'm very grateful. Thank you, Amber and Miguel and everyone, because this is important and it's good. It's beautiful. I like this. I think that I just found the thing that I like the most. So yeah, grateful.
Thank you, Karina. Thank you for being here and joining our sessions actively. So I will stop sharing. Maria, yes?
Yeah,
Yeah, I just wanted to
sorry
say
if it's
this.
not a problem. I'm gonna have to leave. I'm about to start to work, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't worry.
bye
Okay.
bye you all. Thank you. Thank
Bye
you.
Bye,
bye,
Karina.
Karina. Yes, Maria?
Yeah, I just wanted to say sort of similar thing. Just thank you very much for all the information. The course was this was like very full, very complete, which helped me um a lot. Specifically, I really enjoyed the fact that it was like divided with writing, reading, um, the different activities, speaking, because I feel like going this much, like going this in depth on these things is really good, particularly for teachers who are starting, because for me it was like, okay, I felt like I did a lot of these things sort of instinctively, like I just thought this is must be the right way of doing things. But having it sort of like confirmed that okay, these procedures are okay. It's okay if you put the if you grab the sentence, if you grab like a paragraph and just divide the sentences and ask the students to go from like each by each of them, just like saying that the methodology that I kind of like decided to work with, just by thinking this should be okay, is what work, and then knowing how to structure it like properly, like putting words or giving a language to things that I just thought I should do. It really helped. And of course, I got a lot of new insights as well on how teaching works. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria Virginia. That means we have finally reached the end